Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Kemi, and I'm here to talk about Bridgerton Season 4, Episode 1. Before we begin, make sure you guys are liking, subscribing, and turning on your post notifications so you'll know whenever I post. All right, so we start the episode off with, the way it usually starts, where um, we're seeing we're seeing the neighborhood, so we're seeing the cobblestones and all of that other stuff. So it starts off that way, and then we then go into the wait staff, so the servants. We start seeing the servants, and they're getting things ready for Lady Bridgerton, which is Violet, the mom of the house. So um, we see her talking to Miss Wilson, and they're taking the biscuits that they had sitting out initially. They're taking it back to the kitchen because they're going to bring out some warmer biscuits or whatever. So we see them in the kitchen. Everybody's getting everything ready, and then a bell rings, and they say that Hyacinth is up, and then another bell rings, and they're saying that Francesca is back from Scotland. So we see Penelope and Colin. They're at the house because they're waiting on, they're all waiting to see Eloise, Francesca, and John, because they were in Scotland for the summer. So they come home. Everybody is, the family's excited. They're all gushing over the baby, Colin and Penelope's baby. They're gushing over the baby, and Miss Wilson and the other maids, they're talking about the baby, and Miss Wilson makes a comment about having to take care of the babies. They're going to be the ones taking care of the babies, and she's happy that Anthony and Kate decided to have their baby in India. And then one of the guy servants says, I'm happy that we finally have some boys, because we were starting to get a little girl heavy, because there have been more girls in the family. So we see Violet wondering where Benedict is, because everybody is at the house greeting um, Eloise and Francesca, and she's trying to figure out where Benedict is. So she looks at him. I can't remember who the guy was. I don't think that was. I think it was just one of the guys that works for the house. So she looks at him, and she's just like, get the carriage prepared. So he takes her to the. I want to say it was his bachelor's lodging. I think it was his bachelor's lodging. So she goes, and she's just like, she walks into his room, and he's in there. He's in bed with a girl, and then there's another girl sitting, laying on the ottoman or whatever. And she was just like, "Sir, like, what is wrong with you?" So, he was just like, he gets himself, like, she tells him to get himself together. So he comes to the house, and she's telling him, like, you still have two other sisters that still need to get married, and our reputation is what will, um like, we have a reputation to keep up if you want your sisters to get married. He apologizes, and then he says, um he talks about how he apologizes to her. She also talks about how he has to keep his reputation up if he wants to get married. He explains that he doesn't want to get married, and he just hopes that that would be enough for her. And she's just like, "Yeah, no, you're getting married." She's just like, "Yeah, no, you're getting married," and she's going to be hosting the first ball of the season, and he better not embarrass her. He better be there, and he better mingle with the people. So then we see the queen. She called for Lady Whistledown, which we all know is Penelope. And so Penelope comes, and she wants to know what the first issue's about. So Penelope starts to read it to her, and she was just like, "No, no, 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 read it like how it was." So, she goes, "Dear gentlest readers," and then it changes into the voice of Lady Whistledown. who is who starts to speak. So she's giving her spill of what the season is going to be like and who's hosting the first ball. And we see the paper boys going around, giving their handing out the papers to everybody or whatever. So then we see a montage of we see Penelope getting tea from Varley, Miss Varley, which is her mother's second in not second in command, but like the one who's always with her. So her ladies, her ladies maid, I think that's what it's called. And she's also like she does everything for the house. So she's like Miss Varley is the Miss Wilson for the Featheringtons. So we see her getting tea from Miss Varley. Then Colin comes in, so they all leave, and her and Colin start to make out. We see Alice and Will Mondrick, and they're in bed trying to figure out who they're going as for the masquerade ball, because that's what the first ball of the season is, which is hosted by um, Lady Bridgerton, Violet. So we then see the servants getting ready at the Bridgerton house. We see them getting all the stuff ready for the ball, the food, the desserts, the dance cards. We see them like doing, putting all that stuff together, and then we see Miss Wilson going through, making sure everything is good, is going well and going as planned, because she's the um I can't, I don't know what she's called, but she's the boss. I would say she's the boss of the servants. So we see that. We then see Benedict. He goes to, and I want to say it's the whorehouse. I'm not really sure, but he goes to the whorehouse, and he gets there, and he runs into one of his conquest his he runs into one of his people's, Louis. And Louis wants to get a roll in the hay, and Benedict is just like, oh no, I can't do that, I have somewhere to be. And then Louis is just like, it's not gonna it won't, like, we don't have to take a lot of time, it's not going to be that long. So they start to kiss. They start kissing, and then they go and do whatever they got to do. So we go back to the Bennett, not the Benedict, the Bridgerton house. And again, we're still seeing the servants getting everything ready. And Miss Wilson is still making sure everything is up to par. Then we see Violet. It's Violet, Eloise, Francesca, John, Colin, Penelope, Will, Alice, Lady Danbury, and then another lady putting on their mask and then getting ready. Putting on their mask for the masquerade ball. So the last person that we see putting on the mask, we don't know who she is yet, but she puts on her mask, and then she gets, we see her arriving to the party. So her chaperone comes out, and he was just like, my lady. And then so he helps her out the carriage, and then he tells her there's a group going in, just follow behind them and make sure you're out by midnight. So she's just like, okay. So she goes in, and she's in awe of everything she sees. We see the guests dancing on the floor, and she's just walking around, just taking everything in. We then see a new family join. Again, we don't know who they are yet. One of the daughters, she's talking, she's gushing about the party, and her sister tells her to chill, and we find out her name is Posey. So the sister tells Posey to chill, like, you're a lady, you shouldn't, don't be acting like you ain't never seen nothing before. So then we see the girl who came in with the mat, who we last seen with the mat, who putting on her mask. We see her, she sees them, and she gets, she's spooked, and she bumps into the dessert table, which Miss Wilson was telling one of the other maids, don't put the dessert table right here, because this is not a good place. So when the girl bumps into it, Miss Wilson is there, and she's just like, see. So they go and fix some stuff up. So um we see Violet, she's admiring everything, and then we see the girl walk by. So Violet sees Marcus, which is Lady Danbury's brother, and they start walking to each other, and then Lady Danbury approaches um and Lady Danbury thanks Violet for throwing the first ball, and Violet is just like, "Are you sure you're okay with this?" And she was just like, "Yes, I am perfectly fine with this. I'm happy, you know." So then Marcus comes over. He greets his sister and Violet, and they both find out that they're both dressed as Zeus. Violet gives him a compliment, and then she's like, you know, looking around or whatever. So then we see Alice and Will. They arrive and they go speak with the Bridgerton siblings. So they're speaking with Colin, Penelope, Eloise, and then I want to say Francesca and John. They were speaking with them or whatever, and Brimsley comes over and was looking for Penelope. Um, Oh, sorry. Before that happened, so Allison will arrive. They go and talk with the Bridgerton siblings. Then we see Violet. She's still talking to Marcus and Agatha, which is Lady Danbury, and she's just like, you know, I got to go find Bridge. I got to go find Benedict. And as she's getting ready to go find Benedict, the Queen comes in. So the Queen, you know, they all bow to the Queen or whatever. She then tells Brimsley to go and find Penelope. So she goes. So Penelope comes to the Queen, and so the Queen wants to know who is. Penelope was just like, okay, we'll start looking for who the diamond of the season is, and the Queen is just like, nah, I don't want to do the diamonds. Let's do a suitor. We'll see who will be prime picking to be married this season. That's who we're gonna go. So they're looking through the crowd trying to pick a guy or whatever, and like they each pick a guy and then they say something about the guy and all this other stuff. So we see Violet. We see Violet getting. She mouths to Miss Wilson to go and find Benedict. So she goes and she asks the servant, "Has anyone seen Benedict?" And then we see Benedict coming in, putting on his mask, and all the ladies are like, "Oh, it's Benedict! It's Benedict! It's a Bridgerton! It's a Bridgerton!" So he comes in, and Violet sees him, and she makes a beeline to him, and she's just like, "Oh, it's nice of you to show up 2 hours late." And he's just like, "Sorry, and he tries to make an excuse, and she was just like, "And you smell of rum. We're not serving that today. So clearly you haven't been here." And she was just like, "You're going to speak to the debutantes and do it now." So he starts making his round. He starts, speaking to the debutantes or whatever. So then we're introduced to Lady Penwood, which is the new family that we saw. So we get a name. We get her surname. And she comes to Violet, and they speak to each other. Violet doesn't seem to really care for her, but she speaks to her. She apologizes to her for the loss of both of her husbands. Lady Penwood introduces her daughters, Rosamond and Posey, and she says Lady Penwood asked if Benedict is gonna pick a wife this season, and Violet is just like, yeah, okay. And so she leaves them. And so Lady Penwood and Rosamond see Benedict. And so Lady Penwood turns to her daughter, and she's just like, "Have you been doing X, Y, and Z?" They start talking, and then they look back. And by the time they look back, Benedict has already walked off. So they're over there they're trying to search for him or whatever. So we see Penelope soaking in not soaking, but she's, doing her lady whistle down stuff. So she's like hugging the wall and, getting tea from everybody. And she sees Eloise talking to different debutantes or whatever. So she goes and talks to her, and she's telling her, "Oh, I thought you would have gotten tired of pretending with the debutantes." And Eloise is just like, "No, I'm not pretending. Scotland had no people. I was talking to sheep. So this is a nice change. This is a nice pace. I'm liking speaking with the Debs or whatever." So she goes back to talking to the Debs, and Penelope Brimsley calls Eloise again. So we see John and Francesca, sorry, they're talking, and he suggests that they stay there for the season so that she can be with her family. And he's sorry that he invited his cousin into their marital home since they're just fairly, married or whatever. And Francesca's happy that she gets to, stay. So she's just like, yeah, we can stay. Let's stay for the season or whatever. We then see Benedict walking around. He's talking to the Debs, and they're all noticing him, and they're trying to trying to get there, hey, it's me type stuff situation. And he's just like, okay. So then he notices the girl that was, he notices her like looking around, and she just looks so in awe of everything, and she's not focusing on the guys. So then the guy comes up to her and he asks her to, dance. And so she hides her dance card, and she's just like, oh, I must have misplaced it. And Benedict walks up to her with the dance card, and he was just like, oh, I found your dance card. And it looks like my name is next. And so she was just like, okay, thank you. She was just like, I believe so. So they walk off, and he asked, he asked her name, and she asked, why did you rescue me? Um, um, he tells her that he's not used to seeing someone so excited to be at one of these. And then she tells him, he says, I've never seen anyone so excited to be at a ball, and you're just beaming with joy. He offers his hands, and she takes it, and they start going to the dance floor. And she tells him that, she's been doing a good job fending off the gentlemen, the gentleman callers or whatever. And he asked, what did he didn't possess what you wanted in a husband. He didn't possess the qualities you want. And she was just like, I'm not looking for a husband. And he's just like, really? And she's just like, no, I'm not. So the music starts, and so he offers to, he says, well, let's go dance. And she was just like, she admits that she can't dance. And he's just like, oh, okay, so we're playing pretend. So you're gonna pretend like you're a dad that doesn't know how to dance. Well, then I'll pretend to be your dance instructor. And so they start, they do a little banter or whatever. So then he was just like, okay, let's go to the dance floor. And she was just like, I don't think the ton would take too kindly on seeing me make a fool of myself on the dance floor. And then especially if you're the one who's, trying to teach me or whatever. So he sees his mom, and he was just like, okay, well, I can take you to the terrace, but I promise I'm not going to do anything. I can find a maid or a chaperone so that we can be on the terrace. And then she sees Lady Penwood, and she agrees or whatever. She'll just like, she says, I'm going to trust you. So they leave, and then they walk upstairs to go to the terrace. And as they're walking upstairs, the queen sees that all the women are looking at that guy. So she picks the guy, and Penelope is just like, oh no, I don't think that won't be a good guy, because that's Benedict Bridgerton. He's not looking for a wife. And the queen is just like, perfect. He's a Bridgerton. He has the money. He has the status. Like, he's the perfect gentleman that should be the gentleman of the season. And Penelope is just like, yeah, I put my top dollar on him not getting married. And she was just like, oh, okay, bet. We can do a bet. And Penelope's just like, so then we see Eloise. She sees Hyacinth at the ball. So Hyacinth had snuck down. So she sends her back up, and Hyacinth says, I wish you would have stayed in Scotland. So we see Violet. She's looking for Benedict, and she runs into Marcus, and he goes to kiss her hand, and people walk up, and so she leaves. So they were in the hallway, and she was like looking around for Benedict or whatever. And that's when Marcus came up. So when people come, she hurry up, she thanks him, and then walks away or whatever. So we see Alice and Will, they approach the Queen and Lady Danbury. And Lady Danbury isn't really focused on them. She's looking for Benedict or whatever. So, I mean, not Lady Danbury, the Queen. She's looking for Benedict, so she's not focused on anybody. So, Lady Danbury tells them to, like, we'll reconvene later. So then, Lady Danbury, Agatha, she starts to tell the Queen how, it's been an honor to be her lady in waiting, to be her friend, and she thinks it's time for her to go to her homeland. She hasn't been back since she was 3, and she wishes to just be there and just be relaxed. And I just want to chill. Like, I'm getting older in age. It's time for me to just be me, or just sit back and relax. And then the Queen is just like, yeah, no, you can't leave. I was like, what? Girl, you tripping. So we see the girl, and Benedict. They're on the terrace and they're talking, and then he's marveled by the way she's talking. Um, he's not used to this from a lady of the ton. She tells him that she doesn't want to be noticed. And Benedict is shocked by this, and she tells him that she just wants to enjoy herself, but sometimes she feels out of place. She enjoys the details of the event. She enjoys the details of the event, but not so much participating in the event. Um, she He tells her, well, I won't let my mother know. And that's when she realizes that he's a Bridgerton. And then she figures out that he is Benedict. And he's just like, wait, you really don't know who I am? And she, like, sidesteps the questions. So then he tries to ask her questions about herself. And she's just like, every time she asks a question, he asks her a question, she flips it back on him. So he starts to talk, and then he tells her that um he feels like an imposter, especially at his home. And then she makes mention of being in the ocean or in the lake of the shallow end and something like that. So I forgot exactly what it was, but she makes a mention of something of that sort. So the music starts, and he was just like, all right, so it's time for me to give you your lesson. So he starts to give her the lesson. She scuffs his shoe and she bends down to wipe it. And he's just like, oh, no, 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 you're good. Don't worry about it. So they continue to dance, and she has her eyes closed, and he's just like, oh, you're enjoying this dance so much. And she says, I'm closing my eyes so that I can remember it if I want to escape to this moment. Um, and he's just like, she's like no other to him. They go in for a kiss, but he stops it. And he stops it because he was just like, I don't want to mess this up for you. So he instead kisses her on her cheek, and then he takes off her gloves, and then he kisses her hand, and then he asks her for her name, and then the clock strikes midnight, and she was just like, oh, what is that? And he was just like, oh, that means it's midnight, so now we can take off our mask, and we see who each other is. And she was just like, oh no. So she runs off. So we see the guests, they're all taking off their masks, and then everyone sees Penelope, and they're just like, oh, it's Lady Whistledown. Oh, it's Lady Whistledown. So all the ladies come running to her so that they can give their spill on why they should be the diamond of the ball or whatever. So the girl, she bumps into Lady Penn as she's running off. And as she's running out or whatever, and Lady Penn was just like, watch where you're going. Penwood, I'm sorry, not Lady Penn, but Lady Penwood, that's her name. So the girl runs off. We see Benedict running in, trying to follow after her. Colin sees him, gives him a hug, and was just like, oh, didn't see you early. And he was just like, oh, I was busy. And then he's just like, I'll be right back. So he goes outside to look for her, but she's already gone. So we see her at home. We see the girl, she gets home, and she changes out of her clothes, and she changes into a maid outfit. And then her coworker, like the other servants come, and they're just like, they start asking her, how was it? Did you have fun? Did you enjoy yourself? All this other stuff. And then they say, oh, the lady of the house is back. So we need to, so she, sorry. So he tells her, oh, the lady of the house is back. We need to get back to it. So we hear a lady say, Sophie Beck, where have you been? And then we see Sophie bringing Lady Penwood some tea. And so she asks them, Lady Penwood asked her, how was your evening? And she was just like, it was like any other evening. And so she was just like, so why weren't you here ready with my tea? And Sophie is just like, sorry. How is she? Changes the subject, asks them how their evening was. Rosamund says that Benedict was showing interest in her. And her sister Posey was just like, was he? And Lady Penwood says, "Oh, whoever he was talking to and taking up all his time doesn't compare to Rosamund." And Rosamund slams the cookies on the table, and she's just like, "Is there anything else?" And they were just like, "No." So they excuse her, whatever. So then we see the Queen telling Penelope that Benedict is the suitor of the season. And this is when she says, this is when Penn says, I would wager anything that he won't be getting married. And the Queen is just like, oh, bet, put your money where your mouth is, and we're going to have a bet. So how much would you wager? The Queen is a mess. She is a mess. So then we see Eloise talking to Violet, and Eloise is telling her mom that she has decided to become a spinster. And Violet tells her, yeah, no, that's not happening. And last season I was focusing on Colin and Francesca. This season I'm focusing on you and Benedict. So buckle up. And Eloise is just like, so so Eloise leaves. We see Violet sees Benedict, and she thanks him for for speaking with the devs, and she appreciates that he did that, and he listened to his mom, and he was she says that he had I can't remember if he said it or she says it. She says something about he has a new lease on life or something like that. And Violet is happy that he's changing his ways. And he tells her, not so fast. This was just one event. It's not that serious. So she chastises Hyacinth because she can see her, and Hyacinth is just like, oh, did you speak with Eloise? And she was just like, speak with Eloise about what? So she, goes after her or whatever. So then we see we hear Lady Whistledown talking about Benedict and how he dreams can become a reality or something like that. I don't be remembering what Lady Whistledown be saying, but she's talking about Benedict. And then the episode ends. We see Benedict and Sophie both looking at the gloves that they have, because Benedict still has her gloves. And then we see Sophie puts the gloves under her bed, and she goes back to cleaning. So that was the end of episode 1. So far, so this season was really good. I did like it. I really like their story. Because I did read this book and I did like this story. So far, they are really like keeping strictly to the book. So I'm liking that. But make sure you guys are liking, subscribing, and turning on your post notifications so you'll know whenever I post. And I will see you guys in the next one.